I am Jyoteshwar Singh. I am a student of BA Economics studying at Jindal School of Government and Public Policy.
And I'm Pihu Chaudhary, studying at the Jindal Global School of Psychology and Counseling.
And we are your student anchors for today. We are currently enrolled in the course German Women's Writing that is being offered by Dr. Shruti Jain. We welcome all of you on behalf of the Center of Foreign Languages to the online guest lecture series on German Women's Writing, which is being organized in collaboration with the German Academic Exchange Services. We are very pleased to participate in this online lecture series organized by Dr. Shruti Jain and would like to invite her to make some opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Pihu and Jyoteshwar. Warm greetings to one and all present today. When we met the last time, we had the rare opportunity of listening to an insightful talk by Professor Madhu Sahni from the Center of German Studies, JNU. Making the city of Vienna her point of departure, Professor Sahni helped us to look at Malina through a fresh lens of spatial turn in feminist studies, which in turn led us to read a fictional account of a woman's psyche and her tormented relationships with the men in her life as a socio-political critique of fascism and consumerism in post-war Vienna. One of the common threads that links today's work with Malina and the previous works we have read so far is the notion of testimonial narration. Like the works A Woman in Berlin, The Wall, and Malina, Shedding, too, is a testimonial narration of a female voice. In his essay titled The Mirror, Derrida insists that one must oneself be present, raise one's hand, speak in the first person and in the present, and one must do this in order to testify to a present. In addition to the notion of authenticity, the voices in testimonies also have an affective function of persuasion. The reader's emotional responses to the conveyed personal experiences might bring them around to new ways of thinking and treating the individuals whose collective marginalization and oppression are represented. In the given context of the guest lecture series, today's work stands out in two ways. Firstly, we have read and discussed women writers from Germany and Austria so far. One of the unique points of today's work is that it represents a female voice from another German-speaking country, namely Switzerland. Verena Stephan was born in Bern in 1947 and moved to Berlin in 1968 at the age of 21 to become a physical therapist and study sociology in the Free University of Berlin. And secondly, we have witnessed so far women protagonists struggling to formulate their identities while accepting the basic premise of heterosexuality. With today's novel, we enter into a new phase in the history of German women's writing, where the idea of compulsory heterosexuality, a term used by the feminist thinker Adrienne Rich, is called into question. I quote, "Feminist theory," she writes, "can no longer afford merely to voice a toleration of lesbianism as an alternative lifestyle or make token allusions to lesbianism. A feminist critique of compulsory heterosexual orientation for women is long overdue." Shedding, which uses the metaphor implied in the title to describe the main character's development of an unfettered femininity separate from ways and wants of men, appeared in 1975, early in the second wave feminist movements in Germany and other countries. The book sold over 100,000 copies in the first 3 years. It was dubbed the Bible of women's movements in Germany and gathered a cult following among feminists. To enable us to understand this path-breaking and somewhat till today provocative work, we have with us Dr. Shiwanee Parimal from the Department of Foreign Languages, Savitribai Phule Pune University. Thank you so much, Shiwanee, firstly for accepting my invitation, and secondly for suggesting a work that challenges us to rethink our understanding of sexuality, but also is a work written by a Swiss author. This, I am most glad, enabled me as a teacher to string together a colorful garland which I strive to adorn my students with. I would also like to thank Dr. Michael Stadler for agreeing to chair today's session. Thank you so much, Michael, for your support. I would also like to thank the audience for joining us in good numbers. I'm glad that many of you have attended all the talks so far, and I'm grateful and flattered to have received very positive responses up till now. With these initial remarks, I now pass on the virtual mic to the student anchors. Pihu and Jyotishwar, please take over.
Thank you, Professor. Moving on, as elaborated by Dr. Shruti Jain, in today's lecture, we will be introspecting on another piece of feminist literature, The Shedding, written by a Swiss feminist writer, Verena Stephan. The novella was first published in German in 1975 and later translated into English in 1977. It is a semi autobiographical account of a protagonist, a young woman, who goes through a series of experiences that help her discover her own identity as a feminist. This writing lays major emphasis on various themes and perhaps an interplay of the same, such as sexuality, femininity, masculinity, etc. The story follows the protagonist navigating her way through friendships, relationships with men, and later with women. Her struggles with body image and sexual identity, and how she confronts the societal expectations and restrictions placed on women. Through her experiences, she becomes aware of the ways in which women are oppressed and begins to embrace feminist ideals. The Shedding hence tackles issues that were still taboo at the time of its publication, such as lesbianism, abortion, contraceptives, and female sexuality. Thus, her experiences helps one break down barriers and open up discussions about women's experiences and perspectives, such as the ones that we will be introspecting on today.
Yes, absolutely. In Shedding, the author explores different ideas of gender, sexuality, and intimacy using her own experiences with her previous partners. She highlights the differences between her ideologies and those of the men she associated with, and accepts these differences along her journey to build her own unique identity. The author believes in the idea that even if one person changes how they live, it may lead to a great change in society. The book shows us how the author had learned to overcome the patriarchal construct of heterosexuality and emotions and struggles she faces in the process of shaping her own identity.
Now we would like to introduce the chairperson for this guest lecture, Dr. Michael Stadler. He had joined the Center of German Studies of JNU as a DAAD lecturer in January 2022. Until 2021, he worked as an academic employee at the Tübingen university's newly founded College of Fellows, and from 2019 to 2020, he worked in the context of Robert Bosch Foundation's lectureship program in Asia as a German lecturer in China. Dr. Stadler has received his PhD degree in philosophy from universities of Vienna and Ferrara. Um, we now request Dr. Stadler to take over as chair.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much. First of all, thank you, Shruti, for the invitation, and thank you, Pihu and Jyots for the introductory remarks. It's a great honor to moderate today's session, today's speaker, and I'm really excited about the talk today. And let me just say a few words about Dr. Parimal. In 2015, Dr. Shiwanee Parimal received her PhD from the Center of German Studies in JNU. The English title of her PhD thesis was Space in Literature as Third Space Between Literature and Culture, the Significance of Space for Literary Studies. And from 2015 to 2019, she was teaching as assistant professor at Ferguson College in Pune. Since 2019, she has been assistant professor at German section, Department of Foreign Languages, SPPU, Pune. And there she teaches many interesting things. For example, postgraduate courses on literature of 18th century, literature of 20th century, migration and literature, women's literature, and the literature of 21st century. She has published several articles and co-authored a textbook for German language for schools. And I think one of her most recent articles is entitled Gewalt als Mythos, zur Darstellung der Gewalt als literarisches Konstrukt am Beispiel von Alex Capus, Eine Frage der Zeit, or Alex Capus, Eine Frage der Zeit. It's from 2022 and was published in the Jahrbuch für internationale Germanistik. And equally exciting is the title of today's lecture, Finding Her Sexuality, Literary Reflections on Women's Liberation in Verena Stefan's Shedding. So very exciting indeed, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Stadler, for the introduction. I would also like to express my gratitude to the Center of Foreign Languages, Office of English and Foreign Languages at the Global OP Jindal Global University, and also DAAD. A very heartfelt thank you to also Dr. Shruti Jain for trusting me with her work, which is not only interesting, but is also equally relevant after almost 50 years of its inception. So thank you very much, Shruti, who is a very supportive senior and a dear friend from good old JNU days. Yeah, thank you very much. I will now share my screen. So this is going to be the overall flow of today's evening. So I will start a brief introduction, though the work has already been introduced by all of you. So as you can see, the progression of today's talk remains faithful to the progression of the book itself. But we will walk through all these main chapters that are part of this novel or novella, and we will analyze the major themes and figures that keep recurring in all four chapters. So even if the index looks linear because of its limitations, we will be doing a lot of to and fro between all the chapters. And then we will come to the conclusion where we will try to shed some light on the title of the novella, Shedding. A young girl, Flo, comes to West Berlin and gets involved in the feminist movement that manipulated and shaped the social and cultural Werdegang development of West Germany in the 1960s and 70s. While the university youth in West Germany at that time engaged with the new ideas of bringing change and equality in the society, their women counterpart, though initially involved with the same activism, soon deviated from the main students' movement and found it necessary to have its own feminist movement to cater to exclusively the needs of associated with being a woman in a society that is highly patriarchal. Thus, the second wave of feminism and feminist movements started taking shape in the West Germany. Verena Stephan, a feminist activist of the said time, depicts in her debut novella, Häutungen, Shedding, the journey of Chloe through various phases of her life that are mainly associated with her pursuits of coming to terms with her female sexuality, which is also an integral part of her own identity in her eyes, as well as her identity in the society. Verena Stephan, born in 1947 in Bern, Switzerland. In 1968, she left her hometown and moved to West Berlin, where she completed her training as physical therapist. Verena Stephan was the co-founder of feminist groups Brot und Rosen. Häutungen is her debut novella, which is based on her experiences in Berlin. The novel was first established in 1975 in the Frauenoffensive Verlag. The book, commonly referred as the Bible of women's movement in Germany, is the first German literary text of this sort to be written by a feminist author. Though the second wave of feminism gave voice to a lot of unheard stories of subtle and direct oppression of women in the society, the USP of Stephan's novella lies in its accuracy and very real, sometimes brutal, depiction of male-centered society. Thus, within no time, the novella became a bestseller and a cult book of the feminist movement in Germany in 1970s and was translated in 8 European languages. For this presentation, I will be referring to the English translation of the novel Shedding. The translation is done by Johanna Stadler Moore and Beth A. Weckmuller. The translation was first published in 1978 by the Feminist Press at the City University of New York. The literary work is divided in 4 chapters, namely Schattenhaut, Shadowskin, Entzugserscheinungen, withdrawal symptoms, Ausnahmezustand, state of emergency, Kürbisfrau, God woman. Each of the titles depicts different phases of the female protagonist in her journey towards the self. The common thread, however, in all these titles are the enormous efforts taken by Chloe to understand her own self, finding a place initially as a woman in a male-dominated society, soon getting in the state of withdrawal, only to find herself not merely as a shadow skin of the society, rather a thick-skinned god woman who is thick from outside but is at peace with her inner existence in the given biological sex that she is born in. The novel is narrated in first-person narration in the most of its part. Only the last chapter, God Woman, the protagonist, though now in peace with her inner existence, is referred with her own given name and in third-person narration. Chloe, the protagonist and the first-person narrator of the novel, is referred as narrator in the presentation henceforth. The novel chooses a patchwork-like representation of events as well as various figures, not necessarily woven in a sequential progression, sometimes becoming too abstract to read, yet the core argument is so strong that it is not possible for the reader to deviate herself from it. The reader accompanies the narrator throughout the patchwork of various literary and narrative forms such as dialogues, monologues, literary sketches, poems, some real events, as well as some events that take place in the dream of the narrator. The presentation will also remain faithful to the patchwork-like depiction of the novella and will take us through various themes and figures that keep recurring throughout the novel. I'd like to start my presentation by reading out a small dream sequence that the narrator has in the very beginning of the journey. I read, the old sage had 2 treatment rooms in a large Spanish-style building with an inner courtyard. His hands were endowed with a healing power. Everyone who came to him, he massaged thoroughly, taking a long time until they felt whole again. The treatment couch stood in the smaller of the 2 rooms. An archway led into the adjacent room, which was empty. I went to him because I didn't know any other way out. As he massaged me with his warm hands, a lion that belonged to him sat at the other side of the couch. He was an extraordinarily beautiful, powerful animal. His coat and mane brushed against my body throughout the treatment. Afterward, I cradled his head in both hands and stroked it firmly along the sides. Nothing in the world could have disturbed my equilibrium. Before leaving, I wanted to go into the larger room into which the lion had withdrawn. I wanted to look at him all by myself without the old man. The lion fascinated me so much that I would have liked nothing better than to take him home with me. The large room was separated from the hallway by a purple curtain. The heavy velvet absorbed all noises, thoughts, the feelings, severed every connection with the world outside. The old man sat motionless in the small room, oblivious to his surroundings. The lion raised his head as I entered the room. Away from the old man, he became a savage beast of prey again and tried to attack me as I slowly turned back, panic-stricken. I wanted to cry for help, but the purple curtain smothered the sound in my throat. I kept taking the same step forward without being able to budge. At the moment, a little black kitten padded into the old man's room. She was quite naive, a bit willy, and had an incredibly silken gleaming coat. I liked her instantly, but in comparison to the lion, she seemed insignificant. When he discovered her, he was immediately distracted and I could get away. This dream, unlike any other, haunted me for years. Its presence was sometimes intense, sometimes muted. The lion gradually lost its captivating power. The kitten, that is to say, my sexuality, came to the fore. After I had started to lead a different life, I could remember the lion and comfort him without falling under his spell. The old sage, in form of the society that is mainly a male-dominated one, with its power lying in the idea of masculinity, or the male sexuality in form of the attractive lion and naive black kitten, representing the female sexuality, is one of the strongest recurring motifs of the novella. It becomes very interesting to see how subtly yet strongly the kitten turns into a well-grown, self-aware cat, voicing her existence as and when needed. The novel opens with the narrator walking back home wearing a long skirt and a t-shirt. On her way, she is approached by two drunk men, double of her size, who make sexist remarks on her. Unable to register any protest, she continues walking towards her apartment. She is naturally angry, ready to pounce just like a cat, but does not find the courage to do so. In next hours, she must attend a group discussion meeting. Devastated by what she had experienced on the road, the disparities between such discussions and the reality of the world outside bring out a negativity in the thought process of the narrator. It seems impossible for her to imagine a world that is equal to everyone. The words lie scattered in front of her as she tries to pile them together. Is piling the words together and making them look like a coherent text will really make them a reality? She asks herself. From here, she takes a leap in her past and tries to identify the various attempts that she undertook as a young girl to identify herself as a woman. The first memory is of her taking bath in the kitchen basin, where she, for the first time, experiences the feeling of being alive. The feeling is so overwhelming that she becomes aware of every fiber, every pore of the skin that enveloped her body. Then, in a flash of tingling pores came together again, bonding together to yield a sensation, that completeness which was new to her. Here starts the journey of finding her own sexuality through various people and episodes that occur and leave their traces in her life. When she was nearly 20 years old, the narrator was desperate to explore the process of defloration as a way of unfolding her own sexuality. She still possessed a naive worldview where she can associate the act of sexual intercourse with the notion of love and waits for the man of her dreams to experience the process of defloration. As her need to become deflowered overpowers her wait for the man of her dream, she seeks help from an elderly acquaintance in his 30s to help her in the process. Though by now she has started looking at it quite matter-of-factly, as this act should bring her to her own identity, there is an extreme unease and awkwardness in the process. She is eventually able to persuade the acquaintance, who is initially in denial, to help her in the situation. He agrees to it, saying, I quote, "You have to get deflowered sooner or later. I would rather be the one to do it than some other brutal guy," he says. Without removing the layer of clothes from her body, he engages in a sexual intercourse with her. This act shows how patriarchal society is when it comes to the physical relationship between a man and a woman. The fact that she chooses an elderly, experienced man, an attractive lion, in the process of her losing virginity is a proof of the fact how this hierarchy between genders is imbibed in us without giving us an opportunity to question it even once. He also cautions her that she wouldn't be able to do without it once she had had it, emphasizing the dependency of women on their male partners for their satisfaction. Though extremely awkward and uncomfortable, her first encounter with male sexuality and thereby the male centric patriarchal structure of the society plays a vital role in her next steps in the world outside. Samuel is a white activist who believes in Marxism, has been her partner for longest of the period. They do share a sexual relationship with each other, but the relationship does not seem to cross the physical level. His penis moving in my vagina even before I can reach Samuel, the one whom it belongs, she says. Samuel clearly maintains a distance between his political life outside and as an activist and his personal life that he shares with the narrator. I was the one who shared his bed, speaking, thinking, discussing, researching. Those things he shared with others. The old barrier had not been lifted. It was enough that I was present, a fixture in his life as well as in his room, says the narrator. The narrator understands the entire problem around taking contraceptive pills as prevention to from getting pregnant through one of the discussions of Samuel with a Marxist woman. Unlike other occasions, she, being a woman, gets to be a part of this discussion. While she is mesmerized by the medical knowledge that the other Marxist woman has about the contraceptive pills, it also comes as a shock to her that Samuel also possesses a great deal of knowledge in the area. He seemed to be well informed about the pill problem, she says. He was interested in the pharmaceutical industry's profits. How come he hadn't talked to me about this? After all, I was the one who was taking the pill, she asks. Though Samuel looks at the pill problem from the economic point of view, this episode does give the narrator a chance to look at herself as a female body. She says, actually, I never really paid any attention to my female organs. I have never really given the matter much thought. But now that I think of it, I wouldn't really mind if my uterus did shrivel up. Then at least I wouldn't have to worry, she says. A few months after this discussion, she decides to insert a new property, but Samuel is not involved in the decision. She does not find it necessary to include him. It is the women's group, Bread and Roses, who help her taking the decision. So she gets the procedure done on the same day when she has to take a part in the rally by women's group against Section 218 in Cologne. This move by her is, however, not welcomed by Samuel. His growing intellectual proximity with other Marxist women disturbs the narrator. Failing to understand the suffocation that she goes through, Samuel looks at it as a factor of jealousy, an emotion which is very casually associated with women in a patriarchal society, and consoles her that there is nothing going on between him and her. The narrator has, however, transcended all the traditional boundaries of how one understands human sexuality and the need of two people sharing their lives. She says, it would not have mattered to me if Samuel had slept with another woman, which was an attitude he found disconcerting. But I become incensed when before my eyes he engaged in verbal intercourse with another woman, totally excluding me, she says. The personal is political. While Samuel can detach his political life from the personal life, the narrator seems to be unable to do so. Every aspect of her personal life, being a woman, has a political significance, and hence every action taken by her in her private sphere exceeds its boundaries and becomes a political move. In her essay Cacophony, Stefan writes, I quote, sharing is in fact an offspring of collective political process. The personal is political. The oppressed were no longer exclusively other people, the exploited working class and the inhabitants of the so-called third world, but us, women. Books came of the left and women's movement in which a single voice at last said, I. Quote end. Feminism, is that even real? Samuel has a very safe, outwardly casual attitude towards feminism and issues concerning to women. While he does not deny their existence, he plays safe by believing that he does not terrorize women with force and fears, while being totally ignored by the fact that his partner, the narrator, feels ogled and harassed by his ignorance. Women want to be raped is another casual remark by him that unsettles the narrator, but at the same time enables her to look how deeply rooted the problem is. The terrors of sexuality, she says, have been operating autonomously. They will persist in spite of economic upheavals unless we do something about them. Quote ends. While he is engaged with other political issues and busy discussing them with other men and women whose opinion is valued, he turns a complete blind eye to the woman-centric issues that the narrator wishes to discuss with him. I can't possibly get involved in everything, he says. Just tell me what's in the book. Why don't you tell me a nice bedtime story, he says. Withdrawal symptoms. The drifting apart between Samuel and the narrator may thus symbolize why the feminist movement during the students' revolt in West Germany felt the need to have an all-exclusive movement for concerning the women's issue. All these movements, though fighting against the class structure in the society and were aiming for a world of all-inclusiveness and equality, there were still male-centered, where the activist women could identify themselves more with the oppressed. However, their operation was never seriously taken by their male comrades, which is evident by the behavior of Samuel towards the narrator. She was always considered merely as a shadow of Samuel, who always accompanied him without having her own existence. I quote, in Withdrawal Symptoms, she writes, a shadow that regularly and unfailingly accompanies him wherever he goes. How odd to see Samuel with the same woman month after month. I moved into his circle, leaving my own old one behind. Quote ends. This shadow of Samuel does find her own existence gradually as she meets the women of bread and roses. She says, at first I would leave Samuel to attend women's meeting only to come back again to the life with him. Gradually the emphasis shifted. I came back less and less. Quote ends. The final leaf of this relationship is turned when she finally decides to leave Samuel and move to an apartment with other women, each of them having shed for her former life with a man and deciding to share an apartment. Quote ends. In Withdrawal Symptoms, the narrator explains the process of the final detachment that took place between Samuel and her. The initial ignorance, anger, is replaced by Samuel's emotional dependency on the narrator as he realizes that she has moved away from him and does not plan to return. The roles between them seem to have changed drastically. She is no more the shadow that follows him and exists in his life as a fixture, but he comes forth as a man who has got comfortable to having a woman in the restricted walls of his apartments to come back to. I quote, the couple structure proved to be a monolith, solid and impregnable. I wanted to rid myself once and for all of this obsession of being half a couple. This meant capturing one's own shadow, crawling into another's skin, first shedding of old skin. It would not come off by itself. Quote ends. Dave is a black man who stays in Germany without medical insurance and money. He takes help of the narrator as he needs to take some treatment. He is an activist in the Black Panther Party. The narrator meets him during her search of her own sexuality, her own identity. She did not share a healthy bond with herself and thus needed a mediator between herself and herself. This vacuum was filled by Dave. The more audacious and unapproachable he was, the more tightly I wove the strands of our complicity. The more I imagined freedom and adventure, she says. Though loving a black man came for as an adventure to the adventurous act for the narrator, who was distanced by the ignorance of white activists towards the issues of women, Dave still manifested patriarchy that was hidden in his way of racism. I quote, he was the one who decided when I could go out with him. He opened and closed the doors of the world. I stood at the window waiting for the return of solitary battle-weary hero. No matter whether he returned exhausted from work, from union meetings, from football, from too much thinking, or sun-tanned from vacation. I took him in, tended to his needs, gave him strength, she says. Unlike Samuel, Dave acknowledges that the situation of women needs to be changed. However, it does not fit in his scheme of equality. In spite of belonging to an oppressed community owing to his skin color, he is not necessarily sensitized towards the issues of other, qualitatively larger community of women. He bifurcates these two struggles and suggests that women should fight their own battle. Women are better people than men, they've maintained. They are more democratic, more human, more diplomatic. All women are beautiful, he also said. You must begin the revolution. Left to themselves, men will change nothing. They have too much to do. Quote ends. Dave, being a black man in Germany, is more aware of his body than any other white man. The narrator says, at first Dave's racism escaped me. For weeks we had our eyes on each other. Sometimes we would joke about going to bed together someday. He was much more in touch with his own body than most whites and was convinced that their sensuality had atrophied. If my sensuality goes to, what would be left? When we finally slept together, I gave him a free rein. I would prove to him that the sensuality of this white woman had not withered away. As a black man, having a relationship with a white woman was indirectly or also probably unknowingly his way of proving his higher position in the class struggle between men and women. Was his way of establishing a power structure where he gets to enjoy the higher position in a relationship, a status that is taken away from him when it comes to the world outside four walls of his personal life. This enables the narrator to look at the positioning of women in a society on a larger scale. Even though blacks may be more in touch with their bodies than many whites and may, by virtue of this, awaken the long lost sensuality of whites and that does not necessarily mean that it is more enjoyable to sleep with a black man, nor does it even mean that because of his own oppression, he will treat a woman like a human being. A victim of oppression does not necessarily treat other victims of oppression more humanly. The millennial genealogy in which woman upon woman, head bowed, filled with compassion, bends over a man of stone, is made up of a black, white, yellow, brown men and women. Sexism runs deeper than racism than class struggle, she says. As she decides to move away from him, he understands her decision in context of racism. You're running away, he says. That's not very emancipated. The narrator wants to run away from such structure where the concepts like emancipation, violence, non-violence, everything is constructed by men. While fighting against the tyranny of whites over black, Dave overlooks how he constantly recreates the tyranny of men over women. Though the short-lived relationship with Dave ends, it does open the Weltanschauung of the narrator and puts the tyranny of women on a much bigger canvas. Her identification with women does not limit to the woman who comes from a similar set of cultural, social, and political background as herself, but every woman suffering in any corner of the world becomes a sister of the narrator. She writes, rape carries a life sentence for me. I have to reckon with it for as long as I live, and I happen to live in a part of the world where I am not brutally violated as my sister in Vietnam. No one will put rats in my vagina like they do to my sisters in Chile. I only hear about that. Tomorrow it may be different. The patriarchy plays a variety of games, but everywhere they are directed against women and children, the old and the weak. against all who want to live rather than just survive. Thus, the narrator develops the feeling of sisterhood for each woman who is suffering under her given social and cultural context, which are by and large a product of patriarchal society. Positive change in human relationships, says the narrator, will not come about until women are individually so strong that they will collectively become powerful. Sexism runs deeper than racism than class struggle, comes as one of the strongest statements that the narrator makes in her narration. She feels helpless at Wittenbergplatz when she is molested by two foreigner workers during daytime. She says, I probably have a nicer apartment, more social contacts, better working conditions than most of the foreign workers in West Berlin. But every man, foreign or native, can, regardless of his living and working conditions, mistreat me at any time he pleases. Do I have better working conditions simply because I may have a nicer apartment than my oppressor? She asks. The first colonization in the history of mankind that was of women by men. For thousands of years, we have lived in common ghettos in exile to this very day. Who should have the power? The working class, men say. The workers. We live off their labor. They carry our load, they say. Whose body is used to promote the coffee the worker drinks before he goes to work? Who prepared it? And who gave birth to and care for the workers' children? She asks very aggressively. This and many such incidences give rise in her mind to explore sexuality through lesbian relationships. As her horizons start to broaden up, she does not find it necessary to limit her experience of sexuality to the opposite sex. She soon seems to transcend these given boundaries, where sexuality with another partner with whom one shares a physical, emotional, as well as intellectual comfort zone is acceptable for her. Thus, the journey of getting to know herself takes another leap, where she transcends the conventional boundaries of sexualities that expects coitus, a term narrator often uses to refer to intercourse, to be taken place between opposite genders. The narrator tries to find answers to her questions in lesbian vis-a-vis bisexual relationships, in her pursuits of coming to terms with her biological gender, which, as she has by now understood, is a product of patriarchal structure. Three women play a vital role in her attempts of understanding bisexuality. Ines, a female friend of narrator in her adolescence, forms her first encounter with the possibility of homosexuality. While the narrator is in search of the man of her dreams, to understand her own sexuality and thereby her own identity, which lie buried under it, Ines is hesitant to acknowledge that she is different. I quote, Ines spoke hesitantly. She was afraid. She was not normal. She did not feel attracted to men. Something was wrong with her, she said. It bothered her. No one used the term homosexuality, but a sense of uneasiness lingered. Quote ends. Soon Ines takes a leap and decides to travel solo as an attempt to explore the world and herself. Here the narrator parts ways with her. Though Ines keeps recurring in her narration in later parts, both basically develop individually quite differently from each other. It is through Ines that the narrator meets Nadienka. Nadienka is a married woman, but she too is yearning for the self, and that is how she comes in touch with Ines and the narrator. While Ines and Nadienka share a lesbian relationship, Nadienka fills the vacuum for the narrator, who now not looking for a man of her dreams, rather a human man. The narrator is still not ready for a homosexual relationship when she meets Nadienka. I couldn't imagine myself with another woman. I wanted a man who would treat me as well as Nadienka. I wanted at least a sanctuary in arms of a man, she says. The recurrence of Nadienka and Samuel converge and flow simultaneously during the narration. Though the fact that Nadienka is married comes initially as a shock, the narrator never conceives her as a part of a married relationship. She is always perceived as a person who represents a perfect humanness in a relationship. A similar relationship is expected from Samuel by the narrator. It was after that the narrator realizes that Nadienka is pregnant that she starts looking at her as a married woman, someone who is willingly sharing her existence as a half part of a relationship. Finally, something in my life which I am responsible for, Nadienka says. Someone to give me a reason to live. The child will protect me from you too. Protect me from taking the leap in a new life, Nadienka says. Quote ends. Nadienka's view on the ability of bearing and birthing a child contradict largely with those of the narrator in their processes of finding their sexuality. While Nadienka looks at it as a possibility of getting back to herself by carrying the responsibility of a child, the possibility of reproduction through intercourse is largely perceived as a problem by the narrator. Sexuality is for the narrator a means of getting to know herself, which is an inevitable part of the process of shedding that she has undertaken. But the various contraceptive means, may it be in form of a cooperative or the bills, expect her to add an extra layer on her body. If I use contraceptives, I get sicker of than I already am, she says. In order to be able to sleep with a man, I have to become a patient. Contraception has become an unsolvable problem, she says. Myself is more important to me than union with a penis. Quote ends. Tired of the constant societal pressure of not getting pregnant, Section 218 had been outlawed in West Germany during this time, that she decides to withdraw from the sexuality as it proved to be a hurdle in getting back to herself, instead of being a mediator in the process. Though Nadienka and the narrator part their ways after her pregnancy, Nadienka still holds a special place in the life of the narrator, whom she calls her alter ego. I quote, "She is my alter ego. When I encounter her, I encounter a part of myself as well. No shared projects, outside interests, hardly a common history. Yet the intimacy lingers. No matter how seldom we see each other, if we were together, would we discover that much was lacking? Is this intimacy really a basis, or is it ultimately that only that which we cannot, or only with a great difficulty, achieve with each other? Someone approach with other people. Someone approaches me the same way I approach others. Does that make her my alter ego? Is Nadienka a mirror image, or are we mistaken? But if so, about what? Why shouldn't we believe each other? Why shouldn't we be able to shelter each other, be close to each other despite the spatial distances? She asks. Nadienka still keeps recurring in the next chapters as participant of various discussion groups and thus remain, in a rather indirect way, a part of the Werdegang, the development of the protagonist. She is also seen accompanied by her daughter, suggesting an alternative way of looking at the self despite being in the conventional given roles in the society. The growing distance between Samuel and the narrator gradually gets filled by the presence of Fenna, an artist who, along with the narrator, tries to explore the possibilities of lesbian relationship. By the time Fenna and the narrator cross paths, the narrator has moved in leaps and bounds in her pursuits of learning about the sexuality. While she's coming to terms with her own sexuality, she seems to be open to initiate a relationship with Fenna too. However, Fenna is not sure how and where she can place this relationship with the narrator. Though there is an obvious comfort zone between the two of them and they understand each other a great deal, they are, especially Fenna, does not seem to be ready to take this leap of a lesbian relationship. I quote, I still can't quite deal with our relationship, said Fenna in the last conversation before I left for America. I can't fit us in our life. I don't even know whether I want to. My painting is still the most important thing to me. I felt rejected. Quote ends. There seem to be a lot of internal and external circumstances barring them from coming together. In one such attempt, they were interrupted by cats yowling beneath their window. Our hearts started beating. I quote, we sat bolt upright in bed. Wasn't that a shadow of a man? Was it really just the wind rustling through the trees? Sobered and wide awake, we lay next to each other, apart once again. Cats, murmured Fena, drifting off to sleep. It would have to be cats to disturb us. Quote ends. The cat here symbolizes the kitten in the dream sequence of the narrator, where the tiny kitten had symbolized her own sexuality. The tiny kitten then seemed quite invisible in the dream, has now become a grown-up cat in the reality who has a say in the pursuits of the narrator to get along with the self. State of emergency. Whether at war or in peace, we exist in state of emergency. The first mention of state of emergency finds a place in the very first chapter, Shadow's Keep, where the narrator finds the life as a woman as constantly under pressure of being in a state of emergency imposed by the world outside. I quote, the master of the world sits opposite to me in the subway. 4 men on a seat that has room for 5. Legs sprawled, padded shoulders, hands resting on their knees, fingers spread apart. To my right and my left, male legs firmly planted. I am sitting close to myself, knees pressed tightly together. Women are supposed to keep their legs together. They are only supposed to spread them for the total stranger called gynecologist and for the man with whom the woman shares her bed. The rest of the time, legs are supposed to be kept together. The appropriate muscles are to be tensed all day long. I close my eyes to cast this repressive posture, to act as though I could sit unhassled with legs relaxed. I ride the subway only with my eyes closed, day and night, countless times. I am infringed upon. This is not my world. In this world, I do not want equality. I do not want to be an equal partner in any man's brutality and degeneracy. Quote ends. The state of emergency intensifies in the third chapter with the same title, where in its second half, the narrator finds herself withdrawn to the world outside. The prominent pattern of first-person narration changes drastically in the first part of third chapter. The narrator indulges here in a dialogue with a woman friend. While the woman friend regards the conventional male-female relationship as a prerequisite of social approval, the narrator looks at bisexuality as a possible solution to all problems related to sexuality. By now, the narrator successfully seems to have transcended the traditional boundaries of sexualities that limit the experience to sexual arousal, orgasm, procreation, and social approval. It is evident from the point of view that she looks at sexuality as a mere way to find herself with a person whom she is comfortable with. The search of an ideal man of dreams comes to reach to the image of a humanly relationship where the engaged partners can find a comfort zone coming close to the self. The pattern of narration only through the first person the woman friend who is not addressed by any other name may symbolize another voice in the narrator. Now she's able to deal with both the voices who simultaneously coexist in her, not necessarily taking one particular side in particular. She accepts when she's accused by the woman friend when she says, "You're being one sided." The chapters that starts with a dialogue between woman friend and I soon withdraws itself in a long monologue of the narrator. The narrator finds herself in the middle of various journeys that she has undertaken during her life. The initial longing for faraway lands as a possibility of dissolving oneself in the vastness of unknown territories seems to be vanishing now. And so does the joy of coming back to home, may it be then her hometown in Switzerland or in Berlin, or to the women who helped her unfold her sexuality to get a glimpse of herself. From shadow skin to the god woman. From the young girl standing in the kitchen trying to find coherence in her body to an old face that shadows certain traces of getting old, the long journey does seem to have left its traces on the narrator. Suddenly, in one such dreams, the narrator finds it surprising how her face has aged, but the body has got new fabric. A new fabric made up of veil of twinning tendrils and flowers green, blue, and red. The young girl, thus, who hated her body, was unsure about her existence as a woman and needed initial approval of the men to understand her own sexuality, has finally come to terms with her own self. Though the only constant that remains with her though only constant that remain with her is in this journey of womanhood are her days of bleeding and two breasts, but they do not hurt her anymore. The journey thus cannot be summarized as coming back to a pre-decided destination, but merely a feeling of moving on without ever taking hold. In the last chapter, The God Woman, the narrator comes as a lone elderly woman who has a name, Chloe. Though alone in her apartment, she seems to have got pacified with her own self. I quote, "Steady. This is the year of the God woman. She got up and went into her room. No longer the year of a would like to be slender woman. The wish I were chested woman. Close bare stresses of her old skins. She's dappled and walks giggling through the streets. Here and there, in the play of light and shadow, the variegated patches glow. The soft, ready to yield skin. The don't be so oversensitive skin. The I'm tranquility personified skin. The sensual, curious skin. The want to experience everything skin. Who can read a dappled skin? Chloe moves her lips. I am my own woman. People turn and stare. To think that nowadays even young women have started talking to themselves. At many occasions, the narrator finds a situation where she constantly feels how new cracks are forming beneath her old given skin. The process of shedding and thereby getting a new identity is never ending. It does involve pain of breaking away from the skin that is given, but the process also ensures moment of freedom, being free from the given roles in a society. Here, it is not only the narrator who seems to be shedding the skin, but gradually also the society, as Close claims at the end, society starts experiencing women who have started talking to themselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Parimal, for this thorough and enlightening summary and analysis of this important literary work. When I was reading the book, it left also a lasting impression on me, and both because of its experimental style, as you said, there are so many elements, both dreams and poems, prose, kind of fragments, no clear sequence and so forth. That language is very, very direct, explicit. It's a very courageous, I find, a very courageous description of sexuality, of patriarchy, and it's also a kind of Entwicklungsroman, I think, and it's open-ended. I mean, I think you agree. We would both like to know how this person develops further in the story. It's just when she comes to a certain point of being evolved, but I think there can be much more developments in her life going on. So it's very interesting. It's also open-ended in ways of reception. I mean, nowadays in 2023, it's still as actual, as recent as in 1975. So let's open the discussion. I'm sure there are many, many questions. And so thank you again. And I hope we have a fruitful discussion. Who wants to ask the first question?
I have a question.
Mhm.
So, did any of you feel like her move towards away from heterosexuality was a form of escape from her struggles?
Well, in a way, it is escaping from the given situation, and she also readily accepts that. She says she wants to run away. So these are the running away are also her conscious efforts to explore the lesbian sexuality and freeing herself from a heterosexual relationship, which she finds as male-dominated relationships.
I would also like to add something more to that. Even in her experiments with lesbianism, which is homosexuality, she does not accept everything as it is dictated by the society, but everything is centered around this unbehagen, her feeling of uneasiness about everything. So throughout this text, she tries to attain this feeling of easiness with everything, with her sexuality. Even when she's in relationship with women, she tries to mold an own concept of lesbianism or homosexuality while being in a relationship with them.
Yeah, that is true.
Okay, thank you, Payal. Are there more questions and comments?
I have one as well. So taking into account different instances in this narrative, especially what happened to the narrator in West Berlin, where she was molested by two foreigners, and where you had also mentioned in one of your slides that the issue of sexism is more prevalent and deep-rooted in the society than colonialism and racism. Could it be stated that the emancipation of a society does not go hand in hand with the emancipation of women, and the male interest and the male lust for power is always at the center, and the issue of gender equality is constantly being shoved to the periphery? So to what extent do you agree or disagree with it? And how does the narrating style in this text provide an alternate to this?
Yes, the novel or the literary works, it takes a stand how basically the concepts of emancipation are male dominated. This entire students movement in West Berlin, which aimed at having let's say equality and a society that demolishes the so-called fixed class structures, it was basically a male dominated group of activists who came together and they looked at the class structures as something that is outside. And gender relationships, a relationship with a woman comes as something that is private and hence need not be put under any scanner. So this structure, these gender structures, they are so imbibed in us that one hardly notices that they are that they are basically discriminating. It is only through the discussions that happened around the equality and around the Marxism that the women started feeling, yeah, okay, what we experience as a reality as given is basically discrimination, which their male counterpart were unable to understand, because the oppressor will never understand the position of the oppressed. And that's why the women's movement had to segregate itself from the mainstream students movement, so that their voices are also heard. So to some extent, in the context when the novella was written, I do agree that the concepts of emancipation, the concept of freedom, of demolishing the class structures are largely male centric, and it is easier to deconstruct something that is outside your house, because your house is the comfort zone that you want to come back to. And women in a traditional conventional society, women are the home where one wants to come back to.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would like to just follow up on this point. In one sentence that you also quoted of the novel is that, let me check, sexism runs deeper than racism, than class struggle, right? On the one hand, I think this is very plausible from the perspective of the novel itself, but the author, which is like, it's an autobiographical novel, so the author is white, comes from a very rich country, from Switzerland, has a very educated background also. So it's not in the she's not in the working class, neither the protagonist nor the author. So do you think, isn't it always the own struggle that is posed on the foreground as most important and most fundamental, whereas other struggles, for example, from like more, if you are suffering from racism, or like if you encounter problems in this regard, so that you would shift the focus more on this side. So how would you say, how could you generalize the perspective of the author, of Stefan, or should we rather categorize this as her personal perspective, more subjective perspective based on her experiences, less as a generalization that sexism runs deeper? So what is your take on that?
Yeah, coming from the mainstream European white background, that she has to feel oppression the moment she decides to leave her house, I'm sure comes as one of the biggest and unexpected blow for the protagonist. And the incident at Wittenbergplatz that she has quoted, she's being attacked by two Gastarbeiter, guest workers, so who are basically at the mercy of the European economy and the wealth and richness. And that certainly comes as a blow, where she is, so to say, the mainstream of the structure. She gets molested by someone who is on the periphery of the society. So it does at some points come to the fore that she wants to neglect the issues of racism and other class structures, and wants to shift her focus to the women centric issues. But for that, she also states her reasons in the poem that she has created, that women are anyways suppressed anywhere. So it is not only a story of a white woman coming from a very rich background, the mainstream of the rich European country, Switzerland, but she also a sister to a woman who is suffering in Vietnam. So as a collective struggle, she looks, so this issue of gender discrimination, she looks in a more collective way. Of course, her starting point, Ausgangspunkt, is that she starts from her own personal relationships, but she's soon able to break through these boundaries and look at it on a larger scale.
All right, thank you very much for the answer. Next question is by Madhu Sani, and then PU.
Actually, I would like to take Michelle's question a little further, because you have to place her text in its historical context. Okay, she was really not interested in racism. She was not interested in anything but the women's question at the point when she writes it. And even if she was attacked by the Gastarbeiter, as they are, as the foreign workers, you have to look at the context and what that happened. Because we just recently, I mean, just about 5-6 years ago, when we had that whole fracas in Cologne, no, over the Weihnachten, you know how the response in the newspapers was to the fact that who were the ones who were attacking. This text that Verena Stephan wrote is actually only a text that you can read in its historical context, where women, white women, even if Verena Stephan is talking about the women in Vietnam and all, there is no solidarity. Okay, this is just another way of saying, okay, look, we've got oppressed, women are oppressed everywhere, but women are oppressed differently also everywhere. And you have to acknowledge that. And it is a fact that the white women did not acknowledge that. It took them a very, very long time, you know, till the Asians and the Black women in the United States didn't start talking about, we don't want the white women to tell us how we are oppressed. You know, I think that is really important. So therefore, Verena Stephan's Heutungen is an important text in the feminist movement, but it is a historically important more than anything else. And even when you go down the road of the weibliche aesthetic, there is not much of that over there in this text. For me, I'm not trying to generalize for everybody. You know, there isn't, that question actually doesn't yet come up. What comes up is finding our mother's gardens, like Alice Walker says. They're still going back to see, am I even a human being in that sense, in this white male-dominated society? In India, it would have been in the upper caste dominated society. So I think it's actually a much more difficult question to answer, because I don't see any solidarity in this book, you know. I don't see any of that, frankly, I don't. But then maybe because I belong to a completely different generation and we look at it from a completely different perspective. You know, but thank you so much, Shiwanee. This was a very important text in the 70s and 80s.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madhu, for your comment. Pihu next.
Right. So I had a question regarding how we, like, do you think that the text might mislead the readers into thinking that homosexuality can serve as an escape from the flawed, predominantly patriarchal construct of heterosexuality that is depicted in this case? Like, we notice how after a few failed relationships of the protagonist with men, she slowly shifts on to exploring her sexuality with women. So do you think that it might mislead the readers into thinking that homosexuality can serve as an escape from heterosexuality?
Yeah. Thank you, Piyu. This is a very important question. Yes, I agree. To some extent, the book does mislead because it is also written in such a powerful way that one fears that one might get convinced that, yeah, okay, homosexuality seems to be the only answer to this question. I have also handled this text, some parts of this text a couple of times in my class on women's literature, and there also I encounter students with apprehension and followed by disturbing discussions that this is what we are taking home today, that this is the seems to be the only situation. So no, it's kind of a very apocalyptic situation that, okay, is that all, this is all, that the naivety is suddenly broken and what you have is a very harsh brutality in front of you. But again, then now I take what Professor Sani just said. It is the context in which the protagonist, the narrator, develops her own journey towards lesbianism is important. And sometimes as students of literature, we have to also acknowledge the need to have such shock effects so that one starts to think about it. So I think it is both. It is based on her personal accounts, but it is also the literary freedom to some extent that the author explores, so that people are really, shaken out of their slumbers. Okay, all is good. The casual attitude that Samuel represents in her, he represents the majority of the society, and for that Samuel is not a not a bad guy. She accepts that he's a sincere guy. He's a sincere activist, and she acknowledges how he has always shown her fondness to the protagonist and this. But it does act as a shock to come out of the slumber. Okay, all is well, and one really starts to think about it.
Okay. I don't see any questions at the moment. Oh, yeah, Shruti. Okay.
Thank you, Shiwanee, for this very interesting, well, let's say discussion. Now we've already, I mean, the discussion is heating up. We are already discussing very major points. You also said that there is also amongst your students, there has been this impression of the novel misleading, I mean, sending out the message which might be misleading. What also adds to this is how she portrays the womanhood that she wants women to embrace. Somehow in the latter half of the book, especially the state of emergency, and then also the God woman. The first two books, there is a lot of critique of the patriarchy. It is very clear, and she is actually kind of strengthening her argument. And one sees how it works. It's pretty logical. However, in this latter half, there is a lot of reluctance from both, on both sides, on her side, and also the three women that she actually also engages with romantically or has an intimate relation with. There is a lot of resistance even among them. The fact that they're opening up, coming out of the closet slowly, and what choices they eventually make. Also, I found that, she kind of mythologizes her own body, her own sexuality, talking about how, feeling the clitoris, which was, and it took her centuries to really understand it. She uses images like flower. She uses deflowering in the beginning, but then she sticks to also such images which talk about the body. I thought about the God woman, and I thought about not, I was interested. I mean, it was interesting that you saw it as a thick skin, outer sin. And I kept thinking of the bottle gourd, however, passion cubist somehow. And because there is also in the beginning, also a whole, an account of how she looks and how her breasts look, how they're sagging because she's become old now. And there is eventually no conclusion. Is she really comfortable within her skin? We're not really sure, though there is this line kind of sounding very final. I don't know. There is really, as Michael also pointed out, there is no real end. And can there be an end even? So I thought, she could have maybe strengthened her argument a little bit, or is it actually okay to do so? That she actually leaves it. Even there is an account of her, her actual relation where she says, well, in a body, in a relationship between two women, you can actually also learn to be the recipient. You don't always have to be the giver only. The motherliness that she feels in this intimate relationship with another woman, that she feels mothered and also is able to care. So these are certain points that she does highlight. However, I do feel that she could have then perhaps, been a little more assertive about what she's saying, and not just, that was my impression. I don't know. Would you like to react to it?
Yeah, the novel ends in a rather open format, but then how else could this debate and dilemma end? That is how I thought about it, and probably my understanding of God women was because in German it is Kürbis Frau, and so the Kürbis has thick skin and it is soft within. So that is how I connected. I think that we have to accept the literariness where she as readers, she does give us the freedom to understand how we want to look at the god, as a bottle god or as the bigger Kürbis. Yeah, so but I cannot come to a unfortunately, fortunately, I don't know, there cannot be an end to this kind of a dilemma. It is the process of shedding, it is ongoing. It will continue to happen.
The language that she uses is also interesting. In fact, it comes even better, and it becomes so beautiful if you read the German version. The English version doesn't have it. She actually has this, she posts her resistance through language. And that's what she, I think, also mentions in the foreword of the 1974 edition, where she says, well, I'm looking for a feminine language. And there she then uses, for example, even the writing conventions that she goes against. So we see not the gross Kleinschreibung, we see only the first letter is in caps, all the rest is small, for example, which is so unlike German. Then she talks about the impersonal masculine, the impersonal pronoun, which is Mann. Why she then also has this passage where she says Frau, and then she writes the entire thing. So it's very interesting how she then also uses these little elements in language to create a certain rebellion or resistance rather, and that's very interesting through language. And I think that's one thing that Verena Stephan definitely does intentionally.
Yes, thank you for bringing out this point. I was really this was missing, that the way Verena Stephan actually freaks out in the German language, putting the all caps in small, which is, to our eyes of a teacher, that disturbs. Now, wo ist die Großschreibung? And then by subtly yet strongly making a statement of how all the hierarchical structures can be put in question. Just don't make a big deal out of it. Just use it the way you want it. Or the way she plays with the word hair shaft. The hair shaft is a word, the hair shaft, but has hair and no Frau shaft. So that element is missing in the English translation. And that, I think, the language becomes the moment of her getting free out of the confined zones of her existence per se.
And I don't know if we would always only understand Ausnahmezustand as a state of emergency. Could it also perhaps be interpreted, looking at the chapter, also interpreted in a different way, where Ausnahme could be an exception, a state of exception? That she perhaps makes an exception now, when you kept saying that, yes, she now takes the leap. Is that an exceptional Zustand, an exceptional condition? I don't know. How could we look at it? Michael, what would you say there?
Oh, you mean linguistically as emergency? I mean, Ausnahmezustand. As a native speaker, I mean, it's a Zustand, it's a situation that is exceptional, but we don't use it in the literal sense mainly, I would say, because Ausnahme is already an exception. So Ausnahmezustand, I would say it's rather a state, not so much of emergency, but a temporary state in which things are very different than usual. It comes close to Ausnahme, whereas Ausnahme I think is a bit more general, whereas Zustand is also on a global, like it's for a whole society, let's say, or for the nation or for a city, or so. When there's a natural catastrophe, it's an Ausnahmezustand. It has to be declared and taken back and so forth. So it has a bit more concrete connotations and a bit more like maybe society connotations, whereas Ausnahme, you can be everything, But I think it's a nice and a fitting play of words, maybe. Indeed, you could indeed use it like that. Yeah, indeed. I see Pihu, do you want to talk about your question that you wrote in the chat?
Yes, thank you so much for that. So I wanted to ask that since homosexuality, along with, of course, other themes and issues that have been highlighted in the novella, they can be perceived as taboo topics, but do you think that the elaboration on the same is not done as strong as her other experiences? And maybe that is the reason why it remains unclear or subjective to the readers towards the end of the novella.
Can you repeat your question?
So, do you think that her experiences with around the concept of homosexuality when she's exploring her sexuality with women, do you think that that experience is rather not that elaborated on, or rather very subjective to the readers because it was a taboo topic during that time?
Mhm. I personally did not find that she's not elaborating the topic. Maybe the depiction was not as direct as it was done in case of her heterosexual relationships. But yeah, now that you put me in, I mean, I'm also thinking, was that probably, but knowing the way Verena Stefan has written the text otherwise, that she gets that she's scared of handling one particular taboo topic in her writing, and therefore not giving justice to it, doesn't seem like her style, because all that she wants to do is anyway shake people. So the more intensive the taboo is that she would like to.
Okay, thank you.
Mm. I would have a question. So the novel is certainly about experiences, I would say, about experiences of the body, of other people, of sexuality in general. At the same time, my question is, could it also be an experience of space? Because since you walked on space before, the novel starts out with the experiences of being in Berlin as a city, of getting used to Berlin and the seasons of Berlin and so forth. There is a long description of this. I don't know. Was it an interrail tour or so, a tour through Europe that she made when she was younger, in which she developed had different experiences with men also, and she was, I think, no, it was not train, it was, I think, how do you say, hitchhiking tour. Then there is a long episode towards the end where she's in a farm, like at a farm with I don't know which woman it was, yeah, and they stay there at the farm and they sleep in one room and so, which is a different place again. So in addition to all the other experiences that are maybe more immaterial, let's say, of sexuality and of interpersonal experiences. So which role does space and the change of space and the tours also to America and so forth, how do they contribute to the development of the character, if they contribute at all?
Yeah, thank you for this very interesting questions. Yes, the spatial aspect of this novel, it basically generates a kind of feeling that she is constantly on move, either running away from something or getting to somewhere, or her journeys that she undertakes, they are very consciously undertaken journeys where she wants to explore something. So this hitchhiking episode is initially she wants to travel solo, she gets scared and then tries to find company in the youth hostel, and then they go together, and the various experiences that she makes on her journey. So in a way, yes, of course, they largely contribute to her development of getting to know herself. And this is anyways a very classic understanding of traveling, that traveling allows you to go out of the known spaces so that the unknown outside and inside is can be experienced, and that is visible in the way the character develops. No, the last monologue, the in the state of emergency, where she finds herself somewhere in the middle of a journey, where she suddenly realizes that breaking away in the vastness of unknown and coming back to the confined walls of known, nothing excites her anymore, because the going away and coming back do not mean her the same. It is the constant process of moving away. It is the constant going away from somewhere where she feels confined becomes the constant of her life.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, she also never travels with a man. She's either alone or with a woman. So maybe that's saying a lot, that together with a man, she could not evolve also in the physical space or the geographical space.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Okay. Are there more questions?
While discussing, Michelle, may I? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yes, so while discussing the novel, the movie Fire by Deepa Mehta also came to my mind. And I remember it was made on similar lines of the oppression that the two female protagonists that are played by Shabana Azmi and Nandita Das, they face oppression. They are disrespected in their domestic spheres. The elder brother has taken the oath of celibacy, and the younger seeks sexual intercourse outside. And that's in such a situation when the two women come together. So that's again very similar to what Verena Stefan seems to be projecting. When I watched that movie back in 1990s, I think it was, I don't know, I don't remember exactly when, I thought really, is that the only solution? Or how is it even possible? What Verena Stefan seems to be doing is that she actually opens it up a little more, especially the first dialogue between the two women, where the first woman friend, she actually then also talks about very important points about how homosexual relations can be equally power driven. There might be inequality even among male and in homosexual relations. So this is very interesting how the discussion is actually open for the reader to be able to also form an opinion for him or herself or themselves. I find that very interesting. When we watch a linear 3-hour movie, we are not able to look into the nuances uh, of what all has gone into a certain formation of relationships. And whereas Verena Stefan then also provides us with a platform of being able to critically introspect and look at the various situations, and it's open. It's really, so it's not just that she has actually just indulged in male bashing and that she's just all downright for women, or the women's lib, yeah, the bra burner. So it is a very nuanced and sensitive account as well, So I think that's what I felt, and I felt that was very important. So one could perhaps even watch that movie to understand a little bit and gain insight into the relations and the formation of such relations. But of course, the question always hurts, why is lesbianism considered as an escape? Why is it only the solution, a second solution? I could have been a lesbian by choice, by my sexual orientation as well. Today, for example, that's what lesbians actually also fight for. And I am a lesbian because I love women, that is my sexuality, and not because I got ill-treated by men. So that's the question that keeps coming again and again.
Yeah, I think the way homosexuality is depicted with the help of those three characters, they do to some extent deal with this kind of a dilemma. Now I'm taking the example of Ines, the narrator, and Nadienka. They three of them, they explore the homosexuality, and their point of departure towards homosexuality are different from each other. If you take the case of Ines, she's by choice a lesbian, or not probably by choice. She feels she's different, and she feels also bothered about it, but she is also courageous enough to take that leap and explore her homosexuality. In case of Nadienka is already in a married relationship. She also gets pregnant during her exploration of sexuality. So in her case, homosexuality or exploring the lesbian relationship does not come as a forced choice where she wants to explore it. And after exploring that side of a relation or that type of a relationship, that she decides to come back and take a responsibility of bearing and birthing a child, and that does not deviate her from the movement of feminism, and she takes her daughter. I for me personally, I feel that is a good take, that Nadianka comes back with her. So, you know, one may call it as a very safe way of looking at it, that you accept the roles given to you and then try to explore. But that also comes as one of the possibility. It is in case of the narrator that is the process of elimination from heterosexuality to homosexuality is very how do you say can be traced. She very initially makes it clear that she does not want to be a homosexual. She parts her ways with Ines. They are different from each other. She starts from dreaming for a man of her life. You know, so she is also naive enough to associate the love in a relationship and the sexual intercourse with each other. So she wants to have an intercourse with a man that she loves. This is how she starts embarks on her journey. Later, when she meets Nadienka, that again that relationship has a different kind of a nuance. You know, she is attracted towards Nadienka not because she is woman per se, but because she has a kind of humanness that was missing in the previous heterosexual relationships that the protagonist has undergone. So it is only in her case that homosexuality comes as a result of certain eliminations, that okay, this is not working, this is not working, this seems to be the only solution. But by doing that, indirectly, all various types or various reasons, processes through which a person may either consciously take a decision or become homosexual is portrayed.
Okay. Are there more questions? Madhu, please.
May I just say one thing? You know, I get the point why we're discussing this about, but this novel is not really about becoming a lesbian only. It's about so much more. You know, it is maybe somewhere in the tradition of lesbian literature, because, okay, we go back to The Well of Loneliness. That was written at the beginning of the century, almost, at least the first quarter of the century, if I'm not mistaken. That, I think, was doing something else, right? It was talking about her identity as a lesbian and how difficult it was for that. This is about shedding, as you very rightly put, coming to terms with yourselves also as a human being. You were denied your humanity as a woman, actually. And I think this was important. No? I mean, I don't like this first wave and second wave of feminism, but this was what they were trying to get at, I think, if I may. I don't know. Maybe you all have different opinion, but I was just thinking that, you know, we don't have to go on down that path only. Just a small comment, this was.
Yeah, I mean, she also says, I think, at a place where she says that it is her intention to question or shed her skin, the shedding. And I think we should actually discuss, I think that was also what you wanted, that we discuss the title and how apt the title is and whether it is apt at all. And she says, well, die Fälschung der Geschichte, die geschichtliche Fälschung will sie loswerden. I think that's something that she says, that she wants to shed the false history or the and socialization of hers in the patriarchal setup. So that's one shedding that she talks about. So it's basically the conventions, as you have rightly portrayed right from the beginning, that she wants to free herself from her own conditioning, false conditioning. I think that's the word in the book. False conditioning that is a product of her upbringing in a patriarchal setup. So that is maybe one kind of shedding. But she also talks about she also expects men to shed their masculinity. Yeah. There's also one quote there, I think, where she says, well, would they be willing to shed their masculinity as well, the hyper masculine or the masculine superior. And that would be perhaps the second kind of shedding that we're talking about. Yeah, I would like to request the others to also think about this and maybe add to this. Pihu, George, what would your perspective be?
Just speaking of the title, you showed in one of your first slides the portrait of the author, but also the English translation. Is it correct that the English translated title is Shedding and Literally Dreaming? So I'm not sure.
That's another work by her.
Oh, that's
it is a
sorry.
compilation of various essays.
Okay, then I take the question back. Pihu and others, George.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Dr. Shruti Jain. I feel like there are two different meanings of the shedding as a title. One again of the protagonist shedding her own skin, leaving her own past experiences behind and stepping into a new sphere of life, and then also requesting or like maybe posing as a question that will men be willing to shed their skin and their masculinity like she has or like she is. So I think I definitely agree with that, but I would also I was thinking if there is another meaning to the title.
Another meaning as in, do you see any other meaning in the title?
I don't know. I was wondering if there could be.
The process of shedding is quite painful and there is a lot of resistance, as Dave quotes. No, women have to fight their own battles, men have a lot of things to do. That is the first reaction to, because in order to for the men to bring about a feminist revolution in a society, they will have to basically free themselves from the comfortable patriarchy that they have resided. So that side of the shedding is painful, but there has to be also a willingness, which is quite obviously seen in case of in case of the narrator, where she willingly sheds, keeps on shedding the skin. She also feels how the new cracks are. I find this expression quite strong, where she feels that now the beneath my skin, the old beneath my old skin, the new cracks are forming. So there is an element of also destruction, where cracking an old skin is painful, and yet she is willing to do, and exactly that she does not. This willingness of going through the pain of shedding the given skin is missing in the case of the male counterparts that she expects. So that there is not you said it is a request from her, but I find it was a demand. She's quite strong in her in the way she expresses. She wants the society to shed its skin.
How was the reception of the novel after publication? I mean, many people were buying it, obviously, and it was a bestseller, but was it also picked up then later by gender studies or discussed in maybe more leftist journals because of this I wouldn't say conflict, but this tension between Studentenbewegung Marxism on the one hand and feminism on the other hand. So how did different journals and academic disciplines pick up the novel, apart from the reading population who obviously liked it or bought it at least?
Mm-hmm. In her essay Cacophony, which she writes as in the for her edition of 1994, she she describes how mixed the reviews and the reception had been of the work. So because the way she has written the radical, and also because the flow of narration is missing. There are a lot of patches that one has to jump along with her. So the style, the way of writing it, the brutality with which, or the very explicit and direct language that she uses. So the book had received mixed criticism. The book was also, there were a few voices that just did not want to accept it as literature, because no one writes like that. This was the reaction. So all in all, she finds constantly herself giving justifications of why she wrote it. So I don't know if I can find find a quote, but she says, with this book, a kind of this identity struggle starts. So I have to justify the way I have written the book. So in an academia, overall, the book is is received quite with mixed reviews, and I can also understand why. I mean, we do. We are also apprehensive about dealing with such kind of a topic, which we still look as taboo themes. So I think that one can understand the society is never ready to handle something that is always so brutal and putting the all given structures in question. It was not ready then in 1975. I am not sure if it is still ready in 2023.
Okay. Yeah, some topics like also on menstruation, for example, are quite direct, quite explicit, I think. Both in India and in Germany and many other countries, these are still taboo topics, indeed, I think. So all the more important it is, I think, to read the novel nowadays still. Pihu.
Yes, so I also wanted to ask, how do you think that the translation from German to English might have affected how the experience of the protagonist is expressed?
Yeah, as I mentioned it as response to Shruti's text, the language part of the text, I sometimes felt missing in the translation, because the language specific aspects cannot be brought as it is in the target language. So that I missed. But sometimes I also felt the translation to be more a text which was more flowing than the original text. I think because the translator from her position can take a distance stand from the original text, where the original text is it has to some extent come directly from the heart, and so that also explains the patchwork like flow of the text. So I cannot decide which one is better. When it comes to the language part of it, the German text has more Yoko Tawada would say spielerische Räume, where you can play with the language. But the English text is also equally convincing and has a free flow. So one does not necessarily feel that, okay, this is a translation. And I think that is the success of a text as translated text.
So do you think that both the translations, like both the versions, are like the writing is as powerful as the other one? Like we can see that certain themes are highlighted as like very explicitly, or the writing is very powerful. So do you think that both of them are doing justice to the tone, or like the language, or the way it's written?
Yes, in their own contexts, yes.
Shipra and then Paya and then Arati.
Good evening. I was listening. I got to know so many things, so much of facts about this novel. I haven't read this. Really, it was very, very informative. I just have one question. This thing, when it came into the society, the theme was absolutely new, or maybe it came as a shock for the readers. So my question is, do we have any study or any observation whether it was taken by, although it was a voice of women, but was it taken by women in positive way, or was it taken by men in a positive way, or was it criticized by both equally, or did females or readers support it more? That is my question.
The book is described on the very first page of its German translation as the Bible of women's movement. So I think that answers that it was one of its kind. Of course, in the feminist movement, the second wave of feminist movement, there were a lot of female authors who started writing for the first time and very indirectly handled the personal sphere of their lives, which was also criticized that, when women start writing, all that they write is about kitchen, Kinderküche und Kirche. So they do writing about their children and their families and husbands and so on. But I think Verena Stefan has clearly said personal is political. So you need to voice and basically identify that your personal spaces can also be equally damaging and discriminating. So yes, this book was in its time the one of its kind, because this is a combination of two literary traditions where it is fictional work. Though it is based on the experiences of the author, it is basically a novel. It is basically a fictional work, but it also follows what we in German call as die neue Subjektivität, the new subjectivity, where you do take a reference to the facts, to the real, to the realities, and then take a fictional stand on it, so that it is a combination of both. Coming to the next question, who received the book, whether it was men readers or female readers? For that, I am sorry, I won't be able to answer that.
I mean, I just wanted to ask, do we have some study of this kind? I mean, you must have studied, you have done so much of work with novel. Do we get some written record about this in the Google or in the literature somewhere?
I am not very, maybe Shruti, I think Shruti wanted to say something because I was not aware of.
Okay.
No, I wouldn't be able to add to this either. I mean, all we have, the information that we read in text is, it was the feminists, but yeah, feminist does not only mean women. There were a lot of men feminists as well around this time.
Yes.
So I would not exclude men from this, from participating in this discourse.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have two more questions before I think we can end. Payal and Arati. First, Payal, please.
I think I would like to add one more element to the part where we can consider that translating the text from its original language to English, and in that process, some essence of it gets lost. I think in German, the text uses Kleinsprache, which is basically not every word, not every noun starts with a capital letter. And in doing that, the writer somehow challenges the traditional method of writing, which is in turn also dominated by the male discourse. And while doing that, she offers an alternate way of expressing, an alternate way of stating the experiences of a woman. So I think that this also plays a pivotal role in that.
Yes, of course. As we discussed that the language part is missing, because the way Verena Stefan freaks out in her original text, the translator misses those the spielerische Räume, the spaces to play with the language, because this compulsive capital writing is non-existent in English. Yes, of course. When you compare the translation as a text, then of course in every translation the nuance, the linguistic nuances do get lost. But at the same time, when you look at them as texts without their language barriers per se, then I think both are equally strong in where they stand and where
Thank you, Dr. Parimal.
Thank you.
Arati
Arati.
Kumari, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Shiwanee. It was wonderful presentation. I have a very simple question. I just wanted to know, like, as Michael, he said that what I could gather that it was it was a bestseller at the time that the book was written. So, what do you think? What could be the reason behind it selling good? Like, was there a shock element, or was there something which was new that people attracted people towards the book? Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing is that. Second thing is like in what like when the translation of the book started, like was it immediately after the book was written, or in the course of the time that it's like, and it was the reception of the book was basically Europe centric, like I guess you said that it was translated in European languages, or did it travel also outside Europe? The second thing. And the third thing, again, like the first lecture we had in this series, it was like now we are having the queer studies, no? We have moved from women to gender. Now we are talking about several genders. So in that context, where do you place this book? So basically, I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll start with the first question first.
Yeah.
So, as you rightly said, it was basically the shock of writing something that was so real, so brutal, and handling topics like homosexuality, or even the way the heterosexual relationships, the physical relationship, the coitus, the act of coitus, the way it has been described in the novel. It was all very new. So that does play a role in the reception. The language is not academic. It is a normal language that one can pick up the book and read. So I think the shock of someone can actually write something like that was one of the major reasons why this book got this popularity. The first translation, English translation, was published in 1978. So 3 years after the original German book was published, and it is published in New York, published by the city, the feminist press of the City University of New York. So the English reception is outside the European boundaries. Whether it has been translated in other non-European languages, I don't know whether it has been translated I don't think it has been translated, for example, in any Indian language per se. Did I answer 3 questions or 2?
You have answered maybe first 2 questions.
And which one is the third? Sorry, I forgot.
Third was like, where do you place it in today's context, like gender debate that we have in the society? Where do you place the book? Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
Sorry.
Yeah, I would look at this this novel in its context. So it does not necessarily contribute to how we look at the queer movement in today's way. I think what Verena Stefan does in her book is it travels through hetero, homo, and bisexuality. So in its own relevance, it is of course in its own context, it is more relevant than how you would place them in today's entire discourse that talks about the queer movement. Having said that, I do not think the book loses its importance to have read in a class, to locate how and where this entire debate and the literary depiction of such topics may have started. So this going back is for me important.
Just want to add a little bit. Yeah, may I please? Just quickly. The second point, and Verena Stefan, then also after having spent some time in Berlin, she then also migrated to Canada. And so, of course, then, she has a English public as well, a readership as well. So I would say that the 100,000 copies that were sold in the first 3 years, that has definitely got something to do with the English readership as well. The third point is very interesting because that's what we want to also know, that we place the text in the history of gender studies, women's studies, and material studies. And I think we also will be talking about it towards the end when we are going to discuss Jelinek with you, Aarti. And it's going to be interesting because there will be some similar topics that we take from here into that text as well, the piano teacher. So I think we can discuss that, and we haven't discussed this sufficiently enough today. We have to do this in the next session.
All right, it's a perfect cliffhanger. Thank you, Shruti. And it is past 8 indeed. I think, sorry, George, I see that you have raised your hand, but I think it's past 8. We should conclude. And thank you again so much, Dr. Parimal, for this wonderful, insightful, and highly relevant talk on this on the novel. And I think we all have learned a lot. And last week we will talk about Jelinek. So please come back, everyone who is still here. Shruti.
Yeah, Jyots.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Parimal, for sharing such insightful thoughts with us. And thank you, Dr. Stadler, for sharing this interesting sessions. This brings us to the end of our guest lecture today. I hope everyone enjoyed the lecture. I hope everyone enjoyed the lecture just as much as we did and found it to be informative. We thank everyone who attended the guest lecture, and we hope that we see you in the next and final lecture of this guest lecture series. That will be taking place 2 weeks from now. That is on the 8th of May. The sixth and final lecture will be delivered by Dr. Aarti Kumari, who currently works as an assistant professor of German at Vellore Institute of Technology. In this lecture, we'll be discussing the book, The Piano Teacher, written by the Nobel laureate Elfriede Jelinek. In case you want to know more about the speaker and the chairperson, you may refer to the invitation posted in the chat. We hope to see you all in 2 weeks. Take care and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.